So if you follow my channel the past few weeks, you know that the content has sort of slowed down due to this super dry news cycle that's been happening lately in gaming. But while content has slowed down, I was keeping myself very busy playing Elden Ring in hopes of being able to make a review for the game here on the channel. And now that I've finally defeated the Elden Beast and claimed my spot as Elden Lord, I feel like I can finally give you guys an honest and at least somewhat in depth review of my time with this game. So let's get right into it. Now, if you've clicked on this video to hear me say that Elden Ring is amazing and it's my game of the year, then let's go ahead and get that out of the way, because it is amazing and it is my game of the year. Yes! Yes! But obviously, I've got much more to say than just that. And much like my first impressions video I did for Elden Ring a few weeks back, I wanted to start with the whole difficulty aspect of the game, because I think that this is the most prevalent thing for anyone who is on the fence with a game like this. Because after all, it is a Souls game, and Souls games typically have this stigma surrounding them that makes you think that they're the most difficult games in the world. I think the way I've described it a few times is that there's a subsection of fans of the Souls games that talk so highly of these games, but at the same time they'll reinforce how difficult they are to the point where you don't even want to begin to think of trying the game. And this is exactly the predicament I found myself in ever since hearing about Dark Souls back on the 360. And I've avoided these games like the plague ever since. But it was ultimately my friend's hype for this game that made me decide to not only give it a try, but actually go ahead and pre-order the game. In sitting here today, I'm glad that that was the case, because while this game is difficult, and it is difficult, I'm not going to bullshit you guys, this game is definitely difficult, especially compared to a lot of other games that I typically play. There's just so many different ways to approach the game. You can level your character for all sorts of different playstyles to mix and match with different weapons, and there's plenty of ways that FromSoft has alleviated some of this difficulty for new players like myself. I mean, we've got spirit summons that I commonly use throughout my first playthrough on my way to becoming Elden Lord. And basically, this is just the ability to summon spirits to help you fight. You can summon anything from a pack of wolves all the way to an actual mimic of yourself to fight alongside you. So if you're someone like me and you're new to these kind of games, that's definitely going to be something that's incredibly useful for you. And considering that I've already kind of covered difficulty in my first impressions video that I made, I'm going to try to word it differently, as well as add some extra thoughts this time around. I'll say that this game is a game that changed the way I feel about dying or failing in video games, if that makes any sense. Like, in most games that we play today with any sort of combat or action, we're typically just given an absolute power fantasy. And that's amazing. I love those kind of games. Whereas this is a game where you aren't given a power fantasy. It's a game that stacks the odds against you. You start out as a low-level character and work your way up to become Elden Lord. And while it might stack the odds against you, it does a great job at using music and scenery to inspire you to push through and continue your journey even at the most difficult parts. It makes you feel like a hero that can overcome any situation you find yourself in across the lands between. So definitely don't be afraid to hop into this game at all. Just be ready to get humbled a bit, and most importantly, learn from your mistakes. Remember that it's just a game at the end of the day, and even more importantly than that, just have fun. And up next, I want to talk about open world fatigue, because Elden Ring is a game that suffered absolutely no open world fatigue, for me at least. It's probably the only game not named Skyrim where I didn't feel the world was so overwhelming that it just made my ADD go insane. And that's not to say that the world isn't vast, because the map for this game is huge, just on the surface level, and that's not including a bunch of different things to do in underground portions of the map. I mean, so far I've found like 2 lost cities, and I'm almost 99% sure there's plenty more than that I don't know about. I know that nowadays there's plenty of open world games to choose from, and there are certainly some good ones. I mean, I recently enjoyed Far Cry 6 quite a bit, but it's every once in a generation, and sometimes not even once in a generation, that you get a game as captivating as Elden Ring or Skyrim. And to be fair to Nintendo, I'd even put Breath of the Wild up there as well. And what makes Elden Ring, just like the rest of these games, unique is the fact that the game doesn't push you in one direction at all times. It sets you loose in the open world and gives you no direction whatsoever other than that first sight of grace. But beyond that, you're free to make up your own decisions as you please. I mean, you might be like me and not even fight the first boss until you're a level 60. Or maybe you want to just beeline it right for the first boss and fight him as soon as the game starts. There's no open world fatigue because you can do as you please and you're not constantly being told in the top right or left hand corner of your screen to go to some random mission that needs done. You can play it at your own pace. I mean, there were days, especially on the weekends, where I'd wake up and turn on this game and play it all day long and get absolutely none of the story done in that span of time. Because I was just exploring, and one place leads to another, that leads to a lost city, that leads to another lost city. It's an incredibly dense game, and each area serves a purpose, and just about all of them have some sort of story to tell. So whether it's part of the main story or just something that you happen to stumble into, you're gonna get some sort of story just by exploring. I'm not really into giving grades or ratings for games very often, let alone aspects of the games, but Elden Ring's open world easily deserves a 10 out of 10. And then of course it wouldn't be an Elden Ring video without talking about bosses and boss fights. Of course I'm not planning to spoil any sort of story for folks who may not have played the game yet, so I'll just be going over this pretty quickly, not giving an astounding amount of detail. But there are some incredibly cool boss fights in this game, and it's not just your main bosses that you fight along the way. In fact, I think the two best boss fights in the game for me personally are actually optional bosses that you can totally skip during your playthrough. And in fact, I'm going to have a bunch of different boss fights playing throughout this section of the video. Don't worry, none of them are main bosses, so I'm not going to be spoiling anything like that. But it's just to kind of show how different every boss in the game is. They have a different style with different movesets, and it's for that exact reason that you're almost forced to experiment and get out of your elements a little bit, and that helps keep the game fresh. For example, in my first playthrough, I started the game as an astrologer who really only used magic, but by the end of the game, I found myself way more comfortable using melee weapons and getting up close and personal with bosses now that I understood the dodging and blocking mechanics and how to stagger opponents for some really cool melee attacks that chunk the boss's health bars. Unfortunately, I don't really have anything to compare these boss fights to, considering the fact that I've never played a Souls game before this, but the best way I try to describe it is like a very intricate Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order with much more enemy variation and obviously much different weapons. Elden Ring is a game that does so many things to absolute perfection, but that's not to say that the game is without flaws, because it does have some flaws. For example, the lock-on targeting system for combat. A lot of games nowadays have something like this, especially when melee combat is a main focus. Ghost of Tsushima has it, all of the Souls games have had it from what I understand, and you've got Jedi Fallen Order that has it. I mean, tons of games use this mechanic is my point, really. The issue with Elden Ring is that sometimes these enemies can be absolutely huge. So let's say I'm fighting a giant and I hit the lock-on button, and it locks onto the giant's chest. Now my camera is at a weird angle, trying to see the upper part of the giant. Meanwhile, I'm down below swinging a sword at his legs, trying to get it to lock onto his legs instead. And then you've got this camera auto-correction that also happens whenever you hit the lock-on button. And what I mean by that is that if you look to the side of your character and click the lock-on button, it'll automatically pan the camera back directly behind your character as it normally is. And I'll be sure to have a quick example of that playing right now on the screen. This is a really convenient feature that most third-person games have nowadays. Now imagine being in a boss fight and hitting that lock-on button, but instead of locking onto the enemy on the side of your screen, it just pans right back behind you and now you've lost position of the enemy. It's something that happens only for a split second, and it might not sound like a big deal, but in a game like Elden Ring where a split second matters immensely, especially on some of the more difficult bosses, it can ruin an otherwise perfect boss fight for you. So really my only gripe with the game is the lock-on system can be a bit finicky, but if that's my only real issue with your game, then I feel like that means you made a damn good game. Elden Ring is a masterpiece, and it's a game that I hope more studios look at to pull inspiration from when going to the drawing board for new AAA open world games. And that's not to say I want every game to be obscenely difficult just for the hell of it. What I mean by that is I hope that studios realize that you don't always need to have your hand held during a massive open world story. Maybe I don't want to dive right into the main quest. Maybe I just want to explore for as long as I possibly can in one area until I've gotten everything done and then move on to the next. Maybe we can start seeing games make more of an effort to make maps less crowded. I really love the fact that the only thing you see on the map for Elden Ring is sites of grace. I also love the fact that there's no giant mini-map on my screen displaying hundreds of different things at a time, causing sensory overload for my ADD. They went the good old Skyrim route and had a nice compass at the top of the map to help lead you to wherever is marked on your map. It's this kind of stuff that I hope devs can pull inspiration from in the future because it ultimately leads to a more rewarding and engaging experience. And to bring this review to a close, I can once again confidently reiterate that Elden Ring is without a doubt my game of the year as of the moment this video releases, and I think it sets a very high bar for anything that comes after it. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Have you played the game or are you still on the fence? And if you have played the game, let me know what you think of it. Leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts on the game and what you thought about my review. Leave a like if you liked the video, and please remember to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell if you're enjoying the content and want to stay up to date on all my latest videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.